Hi guys. We're going to continue with one more example of synthetic division. In this example, it's a little bit trickier because there's a leading coefficient on the thing that I'm dividing by. And something else that I didn't mention in the first video, when to do synthetic division, you have to be dividing by a binomial. So x plus 2, 3x plus 1, x minus 4, something like that. That's the only time you can use synthetic division. If you're dividing by something larger than a binomial, like a trinomial or 4 terms or 5 terms, then synthetic division is no longer an option. So it is specifically for dividing by binomials. Now, this example is going to get a little bit trickier because there's a leading coefficient. There's a 3 in front of my x. That's going to make it a little bit more difficult. So remember from the first video, we're going to take the thing we're dividing by, the 3x plus 1, and we're going to set it equal to 0 to figure out what to put in that little box corner. In this problem, I'm going to minus the 1, and then I do need to divide by the 3. And so I'm going to end up with a fraction. And that's what makes this one a little bit tricky. So in my little box, I'm going to put a negative 1/3. Don't worry, everything that we're going to have in our synthetic division will be divisible by 3. You should not be getting any fractions or decimals as you're working through this problem. So if you are getting fractions or decimals, you might want to go back and check your calculations. Next, we're going to do all the coefficients from what we were dividing. So I'm going to start with my x to the 4th, which is a 3. And then I have my negative 5 for my x to the 3rd. I have an invisible 1 in front of my x squared. I have a 7 in front of my x. And then it is mandatory you have to have a constant, and this problem does not have a constant. So we did talk in the first video about if something was missing, you can put a placeholder of 0 there. So for my constant, I'm going to be putting the number 0. If you don't put in your placeholders, then your answer is going to be too small of an exponent. If we don't go all the way to the end of the problem, we're not going to be able to get all the way up to that x to the 3rd. So it is important how many numbers that you're working with. The process for doing this synthetic division is the same. It's going to get a little bit weird when we write our final answer, but for filling out the actual synthetic division problem, it's normal. It's what we were doing in the first video. So drop down your 3. When you're multiplying by a fraction, it's the same as dividing by the denominator. So this is really saying 3 divided by 3 is 1, and I'm going to have to make it negative. Negative 5 plus negative 1 is negative 6. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and then since I have a double negative, it'll be a positive 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. Notice everything's divisible by 3. It's all working out okay. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and I'll have to make it negative. 7 minus 1 is 6. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and I'll have to make it negative. And then it's going to be okay that this last one doesn't work out nicely because we actually don't need to multiply anymore. So it's okay that 2 is not divisible by 3. Just like in our first video, I'm going to section off that negative 2, and it's going to be my remainder. And then counting up, I have my constant, my x squared, and my x to the 3rd. Now here's where it gets a little bit weird and something that you have to remember when you're doing this problem with synthetic division. Technically, to get this negative 1/3 right here, we had to factor a 3 out of this parentheses, which means the entire problem is being divided by a 3. So I'm going to have to take my answer and I have to divide it by a 3. Okay? So it's the same thing that you divided by that was on the bottom of this fraction. So my final answer is not 3x to the 3rd. It's actually going to be 1x to the 3rd minus 2x squared plus 1x plus 2, not 6, right? And then we don't have to divide the negative 2 by 3 because we're going to just divide the negative 2 by the original denominator, the 3x plus 1. And we talked about this last week. For your remainder, you can have it adding a negative 2 up on top, or you can have it just subtracting the whole fraction. You have to have some sort of symbol between the constant and the fraction. So make sure that you put a plus sign, or if it was a negative, you can put a minus sign there. This is the end of our synthetic videos.